Okay, it's 10 o'clock on the dot, so we'll get going. We only have a half hour. I want to respect the secretary's time. She's a busy lady these days. A bit of an event coming up. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Capitol Live event with Secretary Kathy Boockvar. I'm Christopher Baxter, the editor-in-chief of Spotlight PA. Spotlight is a nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom covering the state government and urgent statewide issues. Our mission is to hold the powerful to account and better connect Pennsylvanians across the state with their government and their government officials. Unlike traditional newsrooms, Spotlight PA is powered by nonprofit institutions and members who recognize the critical importance of a free and fearless press in Pennsylvania. And if you value this event today, please consider becoming a member at spotlightpa.org/donate. A few housekeeping notes before we get going. First, I'd like to welcome the students joining us from Elizabethtown Area High School. We're really excited to have you. Second, I'd like to let everyone know that we're recording today's event. For those who are interested but unable to join us, we will be posting it to our site afterwards. Third, we've received many questions from folks in advance, and we've incorporated a lot of them into the questions we have today. You can also put questions into the Q&A feature, though we, with the limited time, certainly won't be able to get to all of them, but we do hope with the questions that we've come up with, we're going to address a lot of the common themes that we saw. And just, as a note, those questions haven't been reviewed in advance by the Secretary, and Spotlight PA, as always, operates independently from its funders and subjects. Perhaps this year more than ever, there are a lot of questions surrounding the upcoming election. That's why it's my pleasure to introduce today's esteemed guest, Secretary of the Commonwealth Kathy Boockvar, the state's top elections official. And now I'd like to hand things over to Spotlight PA reporter Angela Columbus, who will lead today's interview. Take it away, Angela.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Secretary, for joining us today. Obviously, we have a lot of questions, including some from the audience, as Chris mentioned. So I'm hoping we can get to all of them in the next half hour. So to begin with, Pennsylvania is on track to reach 3 million applications for mail-in and absentee ballots, which is about double what we saw in the primary. And we know there's been a major campaign to educate voters on the correct way to fill out those ballots, but we also know that mistakes can happen. What do we know about these ballots that have already been received by the counties? For instance, do we know if any must be discarded because they lack an outer envelope or they lack a signature? And is there any recourse when something like that happens?
Thanks so much for having me here today, Angela. And yeah, there are. I mean, thanks to Act 77 passed in the fall and then Act 12 passed in the early spring, there's been more changes to how we vote and run elections in Pennsylvania in the last year and a half than probably in the prior 8 decades. So a lot going on and a lot of people paying a lot of attention, obviously. So we're as you might imagine, because the ballots went out really just about, probably they started, about a month ago after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court allowed me to certify the people on the ballot. So people are really just returning them now over the last week and a half. So I'm going to say, check back with me in another week when we have a better sense of things. I mean, I think a lot of people are getting the message. Thankfully, there's been a tremendous outpouring of voter education, both by the Department of State and through so many others. So I've gotten mailers from political parties, from candidates, from nonprofit organizations and many others, in addition to Department of State's bilingual TV, radio, digital, hard mail, emails to let everybody know things like naked ballots, do not do them, make sure you have your inner secrecy envelope as well as your outer envelope, make sure you sign the outside. So far we're not seeing anything unusual, but it is early. So I just want to say that, and we're making sure, and we still have 2 weeks to go, right, in terms of returning those ballots.
Sure. So just for me to double check what you're saying, effectively, the counties will be tracking at least between now and the election, if there are ballots coming in that are not properly either signed or they lack some sort of the outer envelope, for instance, if they're placed in one of the drop boxes. And if that happens, can a voter know if their ballot is going to be discarded, or is it ineligible for them to be?
Yeah, and it's a great question, Angela. It's very fact specific. So, for example, if you cast your ballot or put it in a drop box or mailbox, and you don't sign the outer envelope, that's an obvious thing that the person who receives that can see right away, and they know whose ballot it is, right? Because it says your name, you've got a barcode that's tracked to you. It's very voter specific, and that's also a great prevention of anything wrong going, right, happening, because we know that that barcode is assigned to you and to this ballot. So if you forget to sign it, and of course, this is something that's been required for decades in Pennsylvania. So there's actually, a code in Sure. So when they're scanned into the system, lacking a signature is a very clear thing. And actually it triggers an email if the voter has put in their email address, or hard mail. Some counties call if they have phone numbers. So that's an easy one where they can notify the voter and the voter will get notice. Naked ballots, as you know, is a brand new thing. Those were not thrown out automatically before, and it was only the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision that established that. And because those are not opened, because we're not allowed to pre-canvass the ballots before Election Day, those might not even be identified until after Election Day. So it may be too late for a correction because we won't even know. And for what the other circumstance that you identified, and I do want to emphasize this because I know it's one that some counties are seeing. If a voter uses just the secrecy envelope, puts it in a drop box and doesn't include the outer envelope, the county has no idea whose ballot that is. So no, they can't notify the voter because the voter has left off the one identifying feature, and that's the outer envelope. So I want to re-emphasize, and anything you guys can do to help make sure, you need 2 envelopes for your absentee ballot to count, or mail-in ballot. Inner secrecy envelope plus the outer envelope with your name on it and your signature and the voter declaration.
Thank you. So the Supreme Court this week is likely to rule on the case brought by your office regarding signature matching. And you've effectively asked the High Court to prevent ballots from being discarded where the signatures on the outer envelope don't exactly match what's on file. Understanding that it is a matter of litigation and that it's ongoing, can you at least sort of in general talk about what the repercussions might be if you don't win this case?
Well, let me start with this. The federal district court in the Western District of Pennsylvania actually just ruled in our favor on this last week. And so so we already have a very strong, I'm just looking at my notes here because this was such a strongly worded decision by the federal district court. And by the way, the judge in that case was appointed by President Trump. So President Trump's appointed judge found that the election code imposes no requirement whatsoever for signature comparisons for mail-in or absentee ballots. It's notably absent, and that our guidance, the Department of State's guidance to the counties, is completely consistent and just instructs counties to abide by what's already the election code. And I just want to be clear, I think it's important when we talk about this that we explain that every way you vote, whether it's by mail, whether it's in person early, or whether it's in person on Election Day, they're all extremely safe and secure, but they have different methods of confirming your eligibility. And there are good reasons for that. So for example, when you vote in person and you sign first of all, Pennsylvania does not require voter ID except the first time that you're voting in a polling place. So the first time when you're brand new, you show your ID. After that, you can walk in and not have shown ID for 20 years, right? And that's considered perfectly acceptable, and you sign in the poll book. One of the reasons why the signature there makes sense is because if somebody challenges your signature, you're physically present. You could prove who you are. You can have somebody else prove who you are. You're there to cure the problem. Voting by mail is very different, right? You're sending something off. So what happens with voting by mail, and again, this has been done with absentee voting for decades, is instead every single time that you want to get a ballot by mail, you have to apply. You have to apply, and your application, we are not a state. There's plenty of other states that do automatically send ballots. We're not one of them. So you apply for your ballot, and when you apply for your ballot, every single time you have to put in either your social security last 4 digits or your driver's license number, and of course your voter information. And before you ever get a ballot, you're checked against the PennDOT database or the social security database and the voter record to make sure that you're eligible and that you're a qualified voter. After you submit your ballot, you do have to sign the voter declaration. And when the county gets your ballot, they check to make sure that you are on the list of voters who requested that ballot and that you're actually eligible to vote, right? And that you're a qualified voter. So it's a totally different way, but at least there's actually more eligibility steps involved in voting by mail than there are in person. So there's very good reasons why they have different rules, but they are different rules, and that's what the federal court confirmed. So I fully expect that the decision that will get issued is going to be consistent with that. But if not, just like everything else, we will adjust and we will immediately change our communications to the counties about what's expected of them.
I mean, understood, but I mean, could you see a scenario if the court does not come down in your favor where tens of thousands of ballots are invalidated based off of that alone?
You know, I don't. But I think, and honestly, it's never happened in Pennsylvania before because it's never been required. Again, there's these other steps involved. I don't anticipate this being a thing. I really think the court's going to find consistent with the other court and that we're going to be good to go.
On the issue of pre-canvassing, where do negotiations stand now? And if there isn't a resolution this week, does Governor Wolf have the ability to use executive powers to permit it? Is that something that your office is asking him to do? And have counties asked for that?
So right now we're focusing, the best solution here would be, the easiest solution here would be for the legislature to do one simple thing, and it's to do what every county in the state, what every voter in the state, probably across the nation, what every voter has been urging, and that's for the legislature to pass a law that gives the counties more time to pre-canvass those ballots. And, it's so rare that you have a circumstance like this where you have an obvious solution that's legislative. It costs nothing. It completely solves the problem, and it has zero negative side effects. It's supported 100% by the governor, by myself, by every one of 67 counties. And I'm willing to bet if you put a vote to the electorate, it would be 99.999% support. So that's what we're really focusing on, Angela. And we are one of only 4 states in the entire country that hasn't done this legislatively. And we're really urging the legislature to do the right thing and take this action that way. That's the best way to go about this. It will be collaborative. Everybody will be on board, and everybody will have then the ability to also claim credit for doing the right thing and allowing us to get results sooner.
Sure. But if the legislature does not come through for you, is it your opinion that the governor has the ability to use executive power to permit pre-canvassing?
We'll have to visit that should the time arise, but I'm going to hope that this happens this way instead.
Would you ask him to do that if the legislature doesn't come through?
I would urge all consideration of any option that would allow the counties to start to perform their election duties in the most effective manner.
Including asking the governor's office to do that.
Look, again, I do not know whether or not I would think that all options should be considered in order to enable effective election administration.
If the legislature does nothing, do you see the sheer volume of people using mail-in ballots as something counties are ready for? And given that the staffing levels at the polls in some of the most densely populated counties in the state, how many days do you think it will take for mail-in ballots to be opened, processed, and counted, and Pennsylvania's base outcome effectively known?
The counties have been phenomenal, at really outstanding. And I have to say, so, as you probably know, but I'll just say it because the numbers were so shocking in the primary. So in the primary of 2016, we had 84,000 Pennsylvanians statewide vote absentee. And of course, in the 2020 primary, we ended up with close to 1.5 million. So little math, that's 17 times as many. And the counties, yes, without any ability to prepare for that, right? Because nobody was able to anticipate the global pandemic and all that came with it. So they didn't have adequate staffing, they didn't have adequate equipment, and they got it done. It's much easier to go from 1.5 million to 3 million than to go from 84,000 to 1.5, particularly because they've had the chance to staff up, get equipment, put best practices in place, and know what this feels like. So really from the day they finished counting the primary, they started preparing for the general. And it's been incredible to watch how they've just dove right into it and worked with us to figure out appropriate timelines and best practices. And thank goodness we received some federal dollars for this. There's been from private foundation dollars that have supported this. So the counties have had more funding than having to just rely on their own county funding. So and you've probably heard, I mean, one of the things that's been just shows you the dedication of these public servants. Many counties are planning on counting literally 24/7 until they get it done. So some of the largest, those are like the largest counties where they have hundreds of thousands of ballots. You can imagine you can get things done a lot faster or in fewer days if you're counting 24/7. And though I would wish that of no one, it's the only way that we can be assured that without the legislature taking this action, which is the right thing to do, the counties will be able to get the overwhelming majority of ballots counted within a number of days. So I think by Friday, we're going to see the overwhelming majority of ballots counted. That, of course, won't include provisional ballots because those are counted after you see whether people have voted by mail or in person. In other ways, they'll also have to judge that eligibility. Of course, overseas and military ballots are not due till a week later. And if the US Supreme Court doesn't reverse the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, we will also be able to accept ballots that are received up to 3 days after Election Day, so long as they were cast by Election Day. So all those ballots obviously will take longer, but for the ballots, the overwhelming majority of ballots, I expect that we'll have those counted by Friday.
I have a question for you from the audience. What should be done if someone who is armed and or threatening appears at a polling place, and are guns permitted at the polls?
So you broke up a little bit there, Angela, but I think you were asking about guns and threatening behavior at the polls.
Correct. I can
Okay.
repeat the question if you need me to.
If I got the gist, just tell me if I miss it. But yeah, so let me start out by saying threatening behavior or any form of voter intimidation is illegal under state and federal law. And if you want to look at so we have on our website, the Department of State's website, votespa.com, you can pull up some guidance that we've issued to the counties, both specifically on poll watchers that addresses some of these voter intimidation behaviors and other things relating to poll watchers, because I know a lot of people have questions about what are these things and what can they do and what can't they do. And I'm happy to talk about that. And also voter intimidation in general. So, so things like asking you for no third party can ask you for documentation. They can't take pictures of you. They can't threaten you, make you feel intimidated or obstructed in your ability to vote. None of that is legal under state or federal law. However, Pennsylvania does allow guns. It's in 66 of 67 counties, open carry is allowed. So if somebody's has a gun, that is a Second Amendment right that's been upheld in Pennsylvania as being permitted. Now, that doesn't supersede certain locations, for example, that are allowed to forbid guns. So, for example, a court, if you're polling places in a court building or something like that where guns are not otherwise permitted, then they're not permitted. But in circumstances other than that, guns are permitted. However, they can't be branded, they can't be used in any kind of threatening way. They shouldn't be, shown other than just being carried. You know what I mean? They shouldn't be holding or using it in some way that might lead somebody to be intimidated. But there is the right in Pennsylvania to carry a weapon.
So are there specific plans that the state has made with law enforcement should conflicts arise? And can you talk about some of those plans?
Sure. Yeah. And I know this is something that, a lot of people have been asking questions about, and we've seen these kinds of tensions. I mean, 2016 had a lot of tensions, and so did 2008, 2012. But I think people are feeling it somehow more this year. So in Pennsylvania in 2018, we formed our interagency election security and preparedness work group that has Department of State, the Governor's Office, Pennsylvania State Police, the National Guard, and Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, PEMA, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, the Office of Inspector General, the Office of Information Technology, including the information security folks for the Commonwealth. I'm sure I'm probably I usually always leave out one. It's usually a different one. But anyway, you get the idea. So basically what we wanted to do, the Office of Homeland Security as well. We wanted to break down silos. So historically, I don't think there was a lot of integration between like the Department of State running elections and these folks. Both at the state level and the state, federal, local level collaboration, and all that has been growing tremendously over the last couple of years, including the federal, state, and local partnerships have really strengthened as well. I'm a member of what's called the EISGCC, which is the Election Infrastructure Subsector Government Coordinating Council. Say that 5 times fast. And that's a mix of the federal U.S. Department of Homeland Security, FBI, Election Assistance Commission. It's got a few of us secretaries of state. It's got a number of county election officials. Same kind of thing. The idea being to strengthen the collaboration, information sharing, and preparedness and ability to react across these sectors. And we've been doing the same thing at the county level to make sure that the county election folks know their emergency management folks and their law enforcement. So we just had a meeting last week with PEMA and the other partners that I just talked about to focus in on this particular question of on the ground security, and really want to not only prevent obviously any problems from happening, but also I want to make sure that we're talking to the election folks and the people on the ground in the counties on how to diffuse tensions, because we know that sometimes when we react, we have the opposite effect, right? So to me, we need to both prevent and react should there be a problem, but also work towards reducing tensions. And so we're going to be working with the counties and at the state level, both for local plans and statewide executive plans, should anything occur and we need to react.
Okay, so those aren't in place yet, or they're still being worked out?
They're still being worked out, yeah.
But
yeah,
it'll be
but it's
throughout.
Go ahead.
It'll be consistent through all counties?
Yeah, as a Tioga County is very different than Lehigh County is very different than Philly. So it's not a one size fits all solution. And even the people that would be involved are not one size fits all. But the key is that everybody is going to be aware of the issues and know who to call and know how to, attack is probably the wrong word, but how to react and deal with such situations.
And will local law enforcement lead that effort, or is it something that is being worked out by the state and federal law enforcement?
So, I mean, it depends on what you mean. I mean, remember, like, law enforcement cannot be present in polling places or around polling places unless they're being called to do something and there's a need. So I want to be very careful. The election people, the poll workers, the judges of election, the election offices, of course, are leading the elections. Should there be, civil disturbances, protests, intimidation, things like that, that's when law enforcement gets involved. Will that involve local or state? It's probably going to be a combination. I mean, obviously local are going to be on the ground. They would be first responders, but we will be working to coordinate efforts so that we provide support and communication, assistance anytime needed.
Just to switch gears a little bit, because we are closing in on the end of this, I wanted to ask a couple of questions if I can fit them in. Counties have to certify the results of their election by November 23rd. What happens if, because of litigation or some other reason, the counties can't meet that deadline? And would that trigger some section of the Constitution to allow the state legislature to step in and name electors for Pennsylvania?
Angela, I am going to leave the legal wrangling to the lawyers, but what I would tell you is this. I have every reason to anticipate that the results will be certified by November 23rd, that the ballots will be counted long before that. The counties are incredibly committed to getting this done as soon as possible. I am not thinking about that. And I can tell you what else. I will do everything in my power to make sure that nobody aside from the will of the voters is deciding who is awarded Pennsylvania's electoral votes. Everything in my power. And I'm willing to bet that I will have 67 county election officials right next to me, making sure that happens. The voters vote. You get to decide who all our elected officials are, and we are going to do everything in our power to make sure that does not change this year.
So we've gotten several questions from audience members about dropping off a mail-in ballot for an elderly relative and receiving sometimes conflicting information about whether that is permissible. Very quickly, what is the guidance on dropping off ballots for another person? Who is allowed to do it in Pennsylvania and under what circumstances?
Okay. Yeah, it's actually black and white. So Pennsylvania law requires each voter to cast their own ballot. So if you're a regular voter, you can't deliver it for your spouse or your sister or your mother. However, if you're a voter with a disability, then you can appoint an agent to do so on your behalf. So we have at votespa.com, you can go onto our website. We have a form, both the voter signs it, appointing that agent, and the agent signs it. So there's that double sense of responsibility. So the agent can act on your behalf. But if you are a voter with a disability, make sure that you use the form and include it with your ballot.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question before I have to turn it back over to Chris. We've also received several questions from people who have requested mail-in ballots but might choose to vote in person. They have concerns about whether their poll workers will know what to do, and they want to make sure that their vote is going to be counted. If you can quickly go through the process and what people should do if there's a problem, and sort of related to that, of course, I would ask a very long question as my final one, but we've also had one audience member raise the possibility of what happens if somebody plans on voting in person and at the very last minute has to quarantine or become sick with COVID. Is there any recourse for that person?
So, all right, so two questions. So the first one, the answer is you can absolutely change your mind. So if you requested your mail-in ballot, take the whole thing, the ballot and the outer envelopes with you to the polling place on election day. Get in line just like you normally would. When you get up to the poll worker, you'll say, I'd like to void my mail-in ballot and vote by regular ballot. And they'll take your ballot and the envelopes from you. Again, I want to emphasize, make sure you have that outer envelope, because without it, they don't know whether you have somebody else's ballot or what. So bring the whole package with you, hand it in. They'll have you sign a special declaration saying, I swear I have not already cast my ballot. I've voided my ballot, and then you'll be able to vote just like anybody else. If you forget to bring your ballot with you, do the same thing, get in line, check in and say, I request a mail-in ballot, but I forgot to bring it with me. They'll have you vote by what's called provisional ballot. So, and those ballots are only counted if they don't get another vote from you. So you can't trick the system. That ballot won't be counted if you really did cast your ballot. But assuming that you haven't, your provisional ballot will be counted. So best to bring the ballot with you if you change your mind, and the outer envelopes. Second question, yes. So Pennsylvania has what's called a process for emergency absentee voting. So if you, and you could go onto our website and check out, get the information on how to do it. But basically it makes sure that, say, for example, you end up in the hospital, you know, I mean, obviously who can, or like you said, quarantine, that you don't lose your right to vote. So there's a special emergency absentee form. And in that circumstance, just like voters with disabilities, for emergency absentees, you can also designate an agent to deliver it for you. So go to votespa.com, look up emergency absentee voting, and it will show you how to do that.
Thank you. For me, Secretary, I have a lot more questions, but maybe we can reschedule another one of these soon. I'm going to turn it back over to Chris, and thank you again.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Kathy, for joining us, for making time. And thank you all for joining us this morning for our Capitol Live event. Events like this one are made possible by readers like you who value independent journalism in Pennsylvania. We at Spotlight PA rely on your support to do this kind of work. If you enjoyed and valued today's event, please consider becoming a member of Spotlight PA by making a donation at spotlightpa.org/donate. See you all soon, and most importantly, get out and vote.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone.
Vote, 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 vote.